The first rule of the code was simple: never miss. The second rule was absolute: leave no trace. The third rule, the one whispered only among the dead: kill what cannot die. No one knew his real name. In the underworld, they called him Cain, and when his name was spoken, men lowered their voices, as if afraid he might hear. He wasn't just an assassin, he was the assassin, the one hired when all else failed, when the target was more than human. For centuries, the world had been ruled from the shadows by those who did not age, who did not bleed, who could not be killed by ordinary means. The Immortals thought themselves untouchable, but Cain had found a way.
The hunt begins.
His latest contract was the worst of them all: Lucius Marrow, an immortal who had ruled from the shadows for over 500 years. Some said he was a vampire, others a warlock who had bartered with death itself. Cain didn't care. Lucius had a price on his head, and Cain had never failed a contract. The hunt began in Prague, where whispers told of Marrow's presence in a cathedral long abandoned. Cain moved like a phantom through the crumbling stone, past murals of saints, now blackened with decay. He found Marrow in the crypt, surrounded by corpses that should have rotted centuries ago, but had not. The immortal smiled, his skin like stretched parchment, his eyes glowing with something ancient and wrong.
"I have been expecting you."
Cain pulled the trigger. A bullet forged from obsidian and cursed silver tore through Marrow's skull, splitting it open like a ripe fruit. Black ichor splattered against the stone, and for a moment, the assassin believed it was over. But then Marrow laughed. His skull knit itself back together, his hollow eyes burning with something cruel.
"Foolish,"
he whispered, and the crypt exploded into darkness.
The cost of failure.
Cain was thrown into the catacombs, his ribs cracking as he hit the stone. Marrow emerged from the shadows, his body shifting, stretching, a mockery of human form. The assassin had faced many things, but never something that enjoyed the kill. Marrow did not rush. He played with his prey, dragging Cain to his feet, whispering ancient curses against his skin, letting the shadows lick at his flesh like starving dogs. But pain meant nothing to Cain. His hand found the dagger at his belt, its blade carved from the bones of a saint, an artifact taken from a church that no longer stood. With one brutal thrust, he drove it into Marrow's heart. The immortal screamed. The sound was not human, it was the wail of something that had long forgotten what it meant to die. Marrow collapsed, his body convulsing, the shadows shrinking from him. His unnatural life force bled out in thick, black tendrils. Cain stood over him, breathing heavily, watching as the monster twisted and rotted into dust. Another name crossed off the list.
The code endures.
Cain emerged from the crypt before sunrise, his coat stained with blood that was not blood. The job was done, for now. Because he knew the truth, Marrow was not the first. And he would not be the last. The world was filled with things that refused to die. And Cain had made it his mission to send them screaming into the abyss.